What in your mind, if anything, is going wrong with the Brexit negotiations at the moment?
It went wrong right at the beginning because the government failed to set the right tone for these negotiations. And I think what we're seeing now is the incapacity of our cabinet to decide amongst themselves whether those who have always actually thought that Plan B ought to be Plan A deregulated future for this country, are now struggling deeply with those who think that we need to manage leaving the European Union in a way that does not damage our economy beyond repair.
I mean, certainly, despite their claims to the contrary, claims of unity, it's pretty clear that there isn't a settled view on Brexit around the cabinet table. But would you also accept that there is at least a degree of confusion on the part of the public as to exactly what Labour's position is on Brexit?
Look, we said...
And Keir Starmer said, we need to do more communicating our message. Would you agree with that?
Look, I'm always keen to communicate our message. But I think what we've been clear about is that we need a transition period, that transition period should be for the status quo as it is now in terms of our relationships with the European Union, that should not change during the transition. We said that, and eventually the government have come round to our position on this. Now, having said that, there are those in the cabinet who are kicking and screaming about it, and that's the problem here. They are more focused on their internal arguments than they are on the real negotiations and discussion that we have to have with the European Union.
But there's clearly intransigence on the part of Michel Barnier and others, that to a degree. Philip Hammond may have misspoke when he called them the enemy, but they certainly wouldn't mind being characterised as that, given the way they behave. So all of that begs the question, what would you do differently? What would you offer to the European Union in this negotiating process that is not being offered by the government?
Well, the first thing that we have offered actually before it all started, and we said the very first thing that we would do is that we would guarantee the existing rights of the 3 million European citizens who live in this country, and we would look to the European Union for a reciprocal gesture for the 1.2 million of our citizens.
But that deals with EU nationals living in the UK. There's a huge amount more to deal with. So we're talking about things. We're talking about things.
Neil, you asked me what we would do differently, and I said that's the first thing that we would do differently. And the reason for that is because it sets a tone of mutual trust. And that's what the government failed to do here. Now, there are many other things that we would be negotiating. Obviously, for a start, we would not wish to be coming out of organisations like Euratom, like the European Medicines Agency. We think that the way in which the government has approached all of this, saying that they have to come out of all these other organisations, is absolutely fundamentally flawed. It is creating real problems for the future way in which we do business. Next week in the House of Commons, we will have a nuclear bill coming into the Commons simply to deal with the fact that the government no longer wishes to be part of Euratom. This is a nonsense.
OK, let's move on to something else which you could give up. How important is it to free ourselves from the legal rulings of the ECJ? Is that a red line? Look,
can I just point out that in any treaty, in any negotiation that you have, where you have an international treaty at the end of it, there always has to be a body that determines whether you've kept to your part of the bargain.
But there's a difference, as the government has outlined, between paying heed to the decisions of the ECJ and being bound by them, isn't there?
Of course. But there always has to be a binding way of reconciling your differences. Now, you can have a separate body...
The ECJ is rather more than the kind of administrative, a tribunal body. It's a legal authority superior to the Supreme Court.
It guarantees rights that this country keeps in its own constitution and in Europe is guaranteed there also. So actually to have a body that says, well, this government has said it wants to bring across all the rights that we currently possess in Europe into UK law, and to have a body that says, here we are going to guarantee that those rights are properly delivered to people, in any trade agreement, you always have somebody that is going to be supervising, and when somebody has a grievance, they take it to that body. Now, we can set up separate procedure with UK judges and EU judges to decide.
To be fair to you, the position that you're outlining at the moment appears to chime with that set forward by Keir Starmer, which said, look, pretty much everything is on the table. We just want to ensure the best trade access. I have to say, though, given the way in which the talks are going at the moment, a no-deal Brexit is becoming increasingly likely. What is your view of that?
It's a disaster. A no-deal Brexit is a disaster for this country. It's a disaster because there would be no clarity for UK citizens living in Europe or for EU citizens living here. It's a disaster because we would fall back onto the tariffs and quotas under the WTO. That would impede trade in this country. It's a disaster because we would have absolutely no certainty for business about the future of
the Shadow Chancellor has this morning said that he believes that the House of Commons would not permit a no-deal Brexit.
Well, I hope that that is true. But the point is this: we should not, absolutely not, have a cabinet that is focused on no deal, even preparing for no deal. We should have a cabinet that is focused on the deal.
But there is a huge logical inconsistency in that position, and it's fairly straightforward that if the Commons unites to ensure that a no-deal Brexit just isn't a possibility, that they would stop it. We are essentially being bound to what the European Union sees as the settlement at the end of the negotiating process. If we can't walk away, they just dictate to us.
Look, it's not a question of that.
Negotiating process in which it is pretty clear that the EU wants to go some distance in giving us a bit of a bloody nose.
Let me explain to you the process, because the government talks of no deal as if it's a trump card that they throw on the table that says, you're not giving us a good enough deal, so we'll walk away. Actually, it's not a trump card that you throw on the table. It's part of the Article 50 process. The Article 50 process says that you have 2 years in which to negotiate. If you have not negotiated by the end of the 2 years a deal about your future relationship, then actually you're pushed off the edge of a cliff into a no deal, which is the WTO terms. Now, what we're saying is that's just what happens. It's not a card to be played.
You'd be better at negotiating with the European Union than the government, and frankly, I could say that.
Well, you could.
And there would be a degree of truth in it, I think, is what I take from you saying. No, let's return to this no-deal point, because I think it is really important. Just explain to me why, very, very briefly, why the Commons voting against a no-deal Brexit benefits us, given the intransigence.
Because a no deal is not in our interest, and it is not in the European Union's interest. If the government tries to walk away into a no deal, then what we need to do is we need to say, no, that should not happen. What we need to do is to extend the period of negotiation. And that can be done under the Article 50 process.
But only if the European Union agrees.
Yes. And they would agree to extend the negotiating period, because all of us know that there has to be a future relationship, and that has to be structured around a deal.
Mr. Gardiner, I admire your confidence. But thank you very much for being with us this Sunday morning. Appreciate it.
Great pleasure.